a council website to the YouTube platform, where the public can view the meeting live and watch recordings of previous council meetings. In accordance with Local Government Act 1993 and Regulation 33, these video audio files will be retained by council for at least 6 months and made available for viewing live, as well as online within 5 days of the scheduled meeting. The written minutes of the meeting, once confirmed, prevail over the video audio recording of that meeting. I now declare the meeting open and welcome councillors, staff and members of the public, and declare the meeting officially open. Agenda item 1, present and apologise. We're all here with the exception of Councillor Wisby, who was an apology.
Councillor Farmer's not here, Mr Mayor. I don't know where he is.
Could be. We'll give him some time before we declare him as an apology. So we're all here in attendance. 1.3, declaration of pecuniary interests in accordance with Regulation 8 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures, Regulation 2005. The Mayor requests elected members to indicate whether they have a close associate, have or likely to have a pecuniary interest in any item on the agenda. Any pecuniary interests with the agenda, councillors? Thank you. Agenda item 2, confirmation of the minutes held on the 22nd of May. The recommendation that the minutes of the ordinary meeting 22nd of May be confirmed as a true and correct record. Does someone care to move that to be so?
I'll move.
Councillor Woods, we have a seconder. Councillor Steiner, all those in agreements?
Mayor Kent, I just have a query on that. The minutes of the ordinary meeting, just last month in April, a couple of people have notified me that there was a discrepancy in the, not the shortened minutes, but the longer minutes. And so I'm just wondering if we can actually put shortened or whatever, because we don't actually check or get the long minutes. And I did actually ask, but unfortunately it was this morning, so, you know, I haven't had time to actually have a look at them. But a couple of people have mentioned it to me, so I assume they are incorrect for April. So I just wanted to bring it up now, because it is quite difficult if we're actually confirming the shortened minutes or the other minutes that we don't see. So. Okay.
So, Mr Mayor, every councillor is sent the long minutes, the full version of the minutes. They are sent via Hightail to be downloaded if councillors choose to have a look at those longer minutes. So it's the preference of the councillors as to whether they want to check the shortened or the longer version.
Well, the question is, are we confirming both lots of minutes, or the shortened, or which ones are we confirming?
Mr Mayor, you're confirming the long minutes. They're the official minutes that are signed, and as Ms Turvey said, that they're sent to the councillors. So, yeah, there's been no corrections brought to my attention, so we're actually confirming the long minutes.
Okay, Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor Kent.
Okay. All those in favour of the recommendation? Unanimous?
No.
No, sorry.
I'm actually voting against because I haven't actually read the long minutes. So.
Oh, right.
So
okay.
I'll actually be voting against. Thanks. Thank you.
I wasn't present.
Sorry?
I wasn't present.
Okay, so we have a show of hands for the recommendation. Councillor Woods, Councillor Steiner, Deputy Mayor, and April, we're referring to May. I wasn't here in May. Those are for, those are against. Councillor Crawford.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Parker, you were here in May.
Was I?
We're confirming the May minutes.
I don't know. I have no idea. I know I missed 2 workshops, and I just presume we.
No, this is the ordinary meeting.
Oh,
I don't
sorry.
recall you missing any ordinary meetings.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the motion is carried, or the recommendation is carried. Thank you.
So is Councillor Parker voting for it or against it?
Four.
Sorry,
Four. That's as I took it, yes, four. Agenda item 2.2, workshop held on the 16th of May. The recommendation, council notes this for information. 2.3, workshop held on the 22nd of May. The council notes this for information. 2.4, workshop held on the 5th of June. The council notes this as information.
Mayor, can I just have a query on those, that for a few months they have attendance of who's going to attend, has been attending the workshops, and all of a sudden now that's not recorded. So I'm just wondering, are we going to have them recorded or not recorded, or sometimes recorded and other times not recorded, or I'm just wondering what the ongoing thing with that will be.
Comment?
Mr Mayor,
Mr Mayor, the reason was that I hadn't attended the workshops and
Yep.
nobody had given me the attendance, so I wasn't aware of who had or hadn't attended any of the workshops. There's no legislative requirement with workshops to put who's in attendance, but we have been doing it when it's available.
So what is the request of councillors? Should we get it out of the road one way or another?
What would be the question?
The attendance at the workshop. Who comes and who doesn't? I
Are you
assume-
asking whether, sorry, Mr Mayor, are you asking whether we want it recorded
Yes.
or not?
Yes,
Well, yes,
yes.
it has been recorded, but Ms Turvey has explained why it's not in this agenda.
Yeah. But you want it back in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Unanimous? Thank you. Done. Agenda item 3, Planning Authority section under Regulation 25 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures, Regulation 2005. The chairperson hereby declares the council is now acting as a planning authority under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 for section 3 of the agenda. The recommendation is the council now acts as a planning authority.
I'll move, Mr Mayor, that the council become planning authority.
Deputy Mayor, seconder, Councillor Steiner. All those in favour?
I want to speak to, thank you.
Yeah. Pardon?
I would like to speak to, oh, sorry, somewhere else. What was
Yeah,
it? That
I-
to go into that, sorry, beg your pardon, yeah,
Oh, yeah, right.
sorry.
Okay, so that's unanimous, thank you. Planning Authority section of the agenda, first item is Agenda 3, 1 Tasman Highway, and the recommendation is on page 26. Would somebody care to move the
Mayor, I'll move that pursuant to section 57 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 and the Glamorgan Spring Bay Interim Planning Scheme 2015, that the application for 6 visitor accommodation units, managers' residence, partial demolition, building additions and alterations, a new vehicle access, car parking, landscape modifications to existing vehicle and pedestrian access and car parking at 1 Tasman Highway, Bishno, DA 2018/63 be approved subject to the following conditions from 1 to 23.
We have a seconder for that recommendation, Councillor Steiner. It's now open for discussion, councillors. Any discussion, councillors? Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor Kent. Actually, problem with this development. A couple of questions first. Just like to say that I have had great difficulty once again in reading the plans and the writing on those plans. Makes it quite difficult. I'd also like to say that this is a significant development and that and has great implications, and I would have liked to see it workshopped with council, like councillors before it came to council. So I won't be supporting this today. I think that clause 19.3.5 of the acceptable solutions of the open space under the discretionary use is not met, and neither can the performance criteria under this clause be met. As for the performance criteria to be met, the development must complement and enhance, that's complement and enhance, the use of the land for recreational purposes, for providing for facilities and services that augment and support passive recreation and natural and cultural values and value managements. The proposed development certainly does not do this. The comments by the planner on page 15 that says the proposals will improve the access arrangements resulting in safer traffic management for passive recreational users and those using the pathway between the site and the road through clearer delineation of the access way. I actually don't find that's true. If you look at page 9, councillors, where the car park is at the moment, there's a really large access area to that car park. That has been a problem I have talked about in the past, that we should have perhaps coloured where the pedestrian is across the next to the highway, adjacent to the highway. Also it has from the track that you'll see on that same page, access off the beach to that car park. But if you actually also have a look at the configuration of the car park on
Yep, 33.
Thank you, 33, you'll see that there is actually no pedestrian, it's the other one that I'm looking for, page 31. You can see there's actually no pedestrian access from the car park either to the buildings or from the foreshore track. And I think this would have been a prime opportunity for those to be delineated and to make it much safer for pedestrian users of that area. The other problems I have is the hours of operations, really open space zone as well as the business zone. The acceptable solutions does not comply, nor the performance criteria is being met, in that the proposed hours of operation of use, which is in 50 metres of a residential zone, will have an unreasonable impact upon the residential amenity of the land in the residential zone through commercial vehicle movements, noise or other emissions due to timing, duration and extent of operation hours. The hours of operation proposed for the food services are 8 a.m. till midnight, 7 days a week, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the visitor accommodation business are unreasonable and will impact residential amenity. On page 17, the planner states that given the fall of the land, this is to do with the lighting, much of the proposed low-level lighting will be below street level. And to me, this in fact means there's more concern rather than less, in that if actually the buildings are much higher on the other side, so you're actually looking down to the lighting and you're actually looking down onto that area there, and the lighting does impact. I was also a little bit concerned that there couldn't be some kind of agreement with the lighting that's already there, which has been approved, but seeing there's a great extension with 6 visitor accommodation units added and the extension of what's already there would have been a prime time to perhaps have a look at that. I'd just like to finish by saying that in the words of one of the representatives, mistakes of the past should not be compounded when changed during alterations, resulting in considerably improved outcomes and aesthetics is not only possible, but highly desirable. I think this is an opportunity that Council had to actually improve things here rather than actually just pass something that's actually come to council that has an opportunity to enhance that area rather than detract from it. Thank you.
Any other comment, councillors? Councillor Parker?
Before we cast a vote, I'd like the planner to comment on what Councillor Crawford's just said.
Through the mayor, I'll do my best. In respect to the open space zone, so there's two zones for this property. There's the freehold parcel, which is where the buildings are located. That's in the local business zone. The existing car park is on a leasehold, and that is zoned open space. On page 9, there's an aerial image showing the existing layout of that car park, which shows a very wide crossover to the car park and no delineation of the footpath. If you look at the proposed site plan, which is on page 31 of the agenda, the proposal is to bring back the car parking and contain it wholly within the lease area, and to seal and line mark and light that car parking space, and then to provide one double width vehicle access into that car parking space, and then reinstate a footpath, a proper actual footpath in the road reserve. So I think there's significant improvements from a safety perspective and from an amenity perspective with respect to that work. In terms of the restaurant use, the hours are being proposed to be extended. The intent is to allow for events to be held, wedding events and those sorts of things to be held later than what the current operating hours are. But I think it's highly unlikely that they'd be operating those hours 7 days a week. I think this is for one-off events. And there is a significant distance away from the houses. They may be within 50 metres, but we are separated by a major highway. So I personally think there's no issues whatsoever with what's been proposed. I think it's a significant investment and a significant improvement in the status quo.
Thank you. Councillor Parker?
Fine, thank you.
Any other councillors' comments before I put the motion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Woods, Councillor Steiner, Deputy Mayor, myself, Councillor Parker and Councillor, how are you, sir? Farmer? Councillor Farmer. Thank you. It's passed unanimously. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Are those against?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford. Agenda item 3.2. 14 Gore Street. The recommendation is on page 46. Somebody care to move the recommendation, councillors?
Mr Mayor, I move pursuant to Section 57 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 and the Glamorgan Spring Bay Interim Planning Scheme 2015 that the application for a residential outbuilding at 14 Gore Street, Orford, DA 201889 be approved subject to the following conditions 1 to 7.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor? Open for discussion, councillors. Any discussion, councillors, before I put the motion? Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, if I may. Through you to the planner, the proposal of this building is 9.38 metres at the highest point, is that correct?
No.
On page 43.
8 metres, yeah.
Yeah, so that's 0.538 metres extra, taller than, higher, sorry, than the recommended height.
Through the Mayor, the planning scheme has a 4 metre setback from a rear boundary, Any building less than 2.4, however, can be built within that 4 metre distance.
Oh, I
So
see.
this is slightly above that, that height standard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Any further discussion, councillors? I put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Woods, Councillor Steiner, Councillor Crawford, Deputy Mayor and myself, Councillor Pope. Unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Agenda item 3.3, bush prone areas overlay. The recommendation is on page 51. Someone care to move the recommendation? Councillor Farmer.
The recommendation that council submits the draft bushfire prone area overlay to the Tasmanian Planning Commission and request that it be considered as part of the council's draft local provision schedule. The attachments, I think there's 46 maps which are attached to the agenda.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillors? Councillor Steiner. Open for discussion, councillors. Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor Kent. Councillors, this is another section I would have liked to see to come to council for a workshop. It's quite complicated. I would also like to see it actually not go for the draft local provision schedules. I'd like to see that it goes out to community before that. You can see on page 8 under stage 3, I assume that's where we're at. That's why I would have liked to have a workshop where it says council initiate planning scheme amendment or submit draft local provision schedule. And what concerns me is that if this actually goes out with the draft local provision schedule, that would be a massive document and it will actually make it a great impost on community to actually be looking at all of those things at once. That's what I assume. That's my guess from reading this a couple of times. I could have it wrong, and that's why I would suggest that we should have had a workshop on it. Also, the implications, I have a look at, and I recognise and appreciate that it's actually being put together by qualified and experienced people, but also would have liked to discuss in depth and have more understanding of some of the towns like Swanwick and whatever, why those are obviously not in the bushfire prone area overlay. I understand their towns, but they've got a lot of vegetation going right up to them, so I would have liked to understand that better. I would have also liked to know why, say, golf courses, and not all golf courses are green and whatever, aren't included in the bushfire prone vegetation, whereas, say, grasslands or something is. So I haven't really even decided yet what I'm going to do, whether I'm actually going to vote for this today, because I actually don't have a great understanding of it. I feel to be passing something I would like to understand it properly. Also the implications for fire management plans and those things that are quite costly for people to, if they're doing a development application or not, I'd like to actually have had a better understanding of where that goes as well. Thank you.
Councillors, is any further comment before the motion is put forward?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Is it possible for, is there a time, what's the word? Is there timing for this to be taken to TAS planning? Is there a time frame?
General Manager.
Sorry, couldn't get the word out.
Mr Mayor, I'm not aware of that, but I mean, as Councillor Crawford said, this has been prepared by Tasmanian Fire Service. They've had all the professionals look at it, and that's their recommendation, is this is just an endorsement to send it along. So
Thank
I
you.
think a workshop would not be called for.
Okay. Any other comment before I put the motion? Councillor Crawford?
Just like to direct to whoever is answering the questions on this. When it says on page 51, bushfire prone vegetation is defined as contiguous vegetation including grasses and shrubs, but not including maintained lawns, parks, gardens, nature strip, plant nurseries, golf courses, vineyards, orchards or vegetation on land that is used for horticultural purposes. So I just wanting clarification on why some of those things would actually be bushfire prone, but they're actually not included in that definition. So just wondering if someone can...
Do you have a comment, Planner?
Through the Mayor, those definitions that are on page 51 are the definitions that we currently work by. So it was probably 4 or 5 years ago that the bushfire provisions were standardised in Tasmania and brought in line with the rest of the country. And at the moment, whether you are deemed bushfire prone or not is based on those definitions and an interpretation of those definitions. The mapped overlay that TFS would like this council to support is simply a mapped interpretation of that definition. They have taken a liberty in some instances wherever they've deemed it was safe and appropriate to reduce the amount of land that is included in bushfire prone areas. But this is their view of what should be included and should be the basis of that. They were pushed pretty hard as to what they really needed to go in, but this is certainly the result of some toing and froing between staff and the TFS. But this is the approach that they use. It's going to be the methodology is consistent across Tasmania as well. So Hobart have already adopted the mapping and have it in their current planning scheme, and every other council will be adopting it one way or the other through the LPS. If it's submitted to the LPS, the draft that councils have previously endorsed can be amended, the maps can be included, and it'll be put on statutory public exhibition when that process happens as well.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Steiner.
Just have a question, Mr Mayor, on the planner. Was council involved in this stage of the process at all with the Tasmanian Fire Service?
They through the Mayor, they provided some drafts to council staff to look at. So, because one of the things that they were interested in finding is what properties we actually abate on a regular basis, because that was one of the considerations that they looked at as to whether it was in or out.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Councillor? Councillors? We'll put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Woods, Councillor Steiner, Deputy Mayor, myself, Councillor Parker, Councillor Farmer. Those for, against, Councillor Crawford. Motion's passed. Thank you, councillors. Under Regulation 25 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulations 2005, the chairperson hereby declares that the council is no longer now acting as a planning authority under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 for Section 3 of the agenda. The recommendation, the council no longer acts as a planning authority. We have a motion to that effect. Deputy Mayor, second. Councillor Farmer, all those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Public question time. We've come to public question time. We have a roving microphone. We'd ask Diane Anderson to...
I hate microphones. I'm sorry, I can speak loud.
It means that the audio doesn't work.
Why should one landowner refuse access through the vacant land on his property to council workers to construct an easement on my property adjoining his, which has been promised for over 15 years? My property, especially the northern boundary, is continually wet and the absent landowner's property on the southern boundary floods regularly. This causes untold grief and annoyance to my elderly neighbours in the Esplanade. Why should an 88-year-old be forced to clean out a so-called drain to prevent his property 2 doors away from flooding? I have letters from Michael Polly, former member for Lyons, Ted Taylor, former operations manager, and Cheryl Arnold, former mayor, all promising action. Why don't the council and Taswater do basic infrastructure works in the older areas of Swansea before spending all the money on new subdivisions? I'm not giving up, and I will pursue this matter until the work is done.
Thank you. General Manager.
Mr Mayor, as far as I know, Mr Pollard, our works manager, has been talking to Mrs Anderson.
He spoke to me once,
and
he hasn't got back to me again.
Well,
And I left a message this morning on his phone.
I'm sure you were only here last week, weren't you?
Last week I didn't come to the last meeting. I spoke to you at the council meeting.
No,
in
last
Swansea.
week were you not at reception talking to Mr Pollard?
I spoke to
Excuse
him
me.
for a short time.
Please. We don't get into a
I'm
debate.
finished.
We'll take it on notice and we'll talk to the works manager and see where it's at. Thank you very much for your question. Thank you. That's the only question we have this evening. Information reports, General Manager David Metcalf. The reports are there for all councillors, no doubt have read the reports. And any questions of the General Manager on those reports, councillors? Open for discussion. Sorry, Councillor Stein.
Mr Mayor, I have a question on page 82. Tribana Hanging Gardens and the establishment of those. Just wondering if there are any designs available as to what is proposed in terms of those hanging gardens, what they will look like.
We've got a DA in at this stage, so
Mr Mayor, I believe we're still waiting the design,
Okay,
final design, so...
thank you.
further questions, councillors? Councillor Crawford?
Thank you, Mayor Kent. Just page 53 to start, with on the bottom of the page, short-term borrowings was required. My understanding was short-term borrowing should come to council for confirmation. I'm just asking a question about that.
Comment? General
Mr
Manager.
Mayor, there was $6 million approved last year by this year by Treasury. That's been in the last 3 agendas, and it was drawn down in June as it has been in prior years.
My understanding that wasn't for short-term borrowings, though.
Yes, it was. It's included in it.
Thank you. I have a question, page 62, on the bottom of the visitor centres. On number 4, with expenditure, it says will level out by the 30th of June, given that it's like $97,000 over, and this is for the end of May. Just wondering how that will happen.
Through you, Mayor, that's been discussed before. We actually have a lot of casuals working in the visitor centres, and they attract a 45% on-cost loading, and at the end of June, when we work out the actual on-costs, annual leave and long service leave, those dollars are written back.
On the following page, on page 64, with invoicing not complete on number 9, which I brought up last month. I'm just wondering if there is an issue with that, and it's carried on for a couple months.
No, there's no issue with it, Mr Mayor.
Yep. Well, Councillor Crawford's looking for a couple of other questions he has. Any other councillors? Councillor Parker?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a question on 58 and several pages over under capital. We seem to, in each department, to have the budget estimates, but for some reason it's not under each item what the cost is. Like I have concerns in the one down in Rebham Road, Spring Beats, road ceiling completed. I'd like to know whether this came in under budget or was it over budget? But looking at that, I can't get any.
Mr Mayor, that was sent to you over a week ago, the detail.
Was it?
Yes,
Okay.
so you just need to look at the detail, and as a council we decided that we wouldn't put the detail on the agenda because it has the budgeted amounts and it allows contractors to look at the budgeted amounts when we go out to quoting or tenders, and they're able to look at the budgeted amounts and put tenders into those budgeted amounts.
Fair call. Yep.
Further questions there?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Councillor Crawford?
Thank you. Just in relation to Councillor Parker was saying it's actually on the end of the financials, right at the end of the ones that the General Manager sends out. I was unaware with those extra costs. But I've actually asked, and I've heard the reason for not putting it on, but when things are complete, I would actually think a transparent way would be to put the costs on then, because, you know, the work's already been done, so, you know, it's not contractors going to actually look at the price and kind of say, well, that's what's been allocated. So I would actually like to see them, once they're complete, put on the agenda for ratepayers to be able to see. My next question was 73. On the status, it's just got a couple of accepted. I'm just wondering what the story is with that, whether that should be approved or whether it's another status. So there's one on the very top of page 73 and there's another one halfway down. Just actually asking for clarification on that.
Mr Mayor, Mr Wells might like to answer that, but I just want to go back to the completed statement that Councillor Crawford made. A job can be completed and not costed for 3 months after it's completed. So we either, you know, so the cost could change from month to month. I mean, it's just easy to put it as completed, but if you put the dollars there, they're likely to change over the next 2 months because we get invoices for the next 2 months. So then we get questioned about why the dollars change. So it's just too hard.
Yeah.
So,
but Mr Wells can answer the. I haven't seen accepted before, but I assume that's just been lodged. I'm not sure.
Yeah, through the mayor. Essentially, that's just from our computer system. I should have changed both of those to being in progress.
Thank you. Page 75, the very last one. It's just I haven't seen it before, so I want to ask the question. With where it says dwelling stage 1, I'm just wondering if maybe the planner could give more detail on that, please. Not about that actual one, but with the dwelling.
Yeah, obviously I'm not exactly what stage 1 is. I'm not too sure, but some building permits are staged in the sense that they can build a garage, let's say, get a completion and then build the rest of the house, or build half a house, get an occupancy on that whilst the balance is built, extra bedrooms and the like.
Okay, thank you.
further questions, councillors? Councillor Farmer?
Page 72, just a clarification on 3/4 way down, 00097, 3 Charles Street, Tribunna. Does that relate to the convict barracks, that particular?
Yep.
So are you able to explain what's actually the story there?
Yeah, look through the mayor. That application is currently on hold. Heritage Tasmania have asked for some additional details. Essentially, though, there is a dwelling proposed to the rear behind the convict barracks. They intend to use the barracks themselves for visitor accommodation and build a structure in between the two to contain stairwells and provide access to the structures.
So there is a DA, a plan?
Yeah, there is
The
a plan.
council?
Yeah, yep. I can provide you a copy of that.
Be interested to see it, yeah. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Any further questions, councillor Woods?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I had a conversation with a ratepayer the other day with regards to the Prosser River Stabilisation Project and with the issue of fishermen or fisher people cutting the bags to rest their poles in, so that they don't have to hold the pole, I suppose, while they're fishing.
Across the river?
Yep.
Yeah.
How is this going to be managed with regards to ongoing maintenance to the stabilisation? And unfortunately, this person was abused when he made mention of the issue to the fishermen. So there seems to be a little bit of an issue down there with people vandalising the eco bags to rest their fishing poles. So I'm just wondering if there's an issue, if there's anything going forward for maintenance and.
I know the manufacturers are there currently, or moving stuff back in to do some repairing and lay out 3 or 4 more bags and repair the ones that have been damaged. So the maintenance on that, I think they back every 12 months or so, well, depending on the issue. As far as I know, General Manager.
Mr Mayor, as far as I know, they can't be cut with any ordinary knife. That's my understanding of them, and I'd be shocked if a normal fishing knife can actually cut them. But
it's a standard.
I'll find out.
Yeah, with all due respect, it's a standard procedure down there at the moment.
We'll put CCTV down there and catch them, if that's the case.
Thank you.
Further questions, councillors? Okay, the recommendation that the management reports be received and noted. Thank you. 6 minutes of section 24 committees. We have the Tribunal Rec Ground Advisory Committee, Marine Infrastructure and NRM. So they are there. Obviously, you've had time to read those. So comments on some of them. Yes. Thank you, Councillor Wood.
On page 101, can I please direct this question to Deputy Mayor Arnold about Bushwatch with the Tasmanian Police? And it says, Cheryl noted that illegal firewood collection has been a major bushwatch issue for us in recent years. Mel and Cheryl provided some background information about the issue. Throughout the General Manager's reports or the Manager's reports, there was an issue within NRM, and it's been an ongoing issue for quite some time about the illegal process of gathering firewood. Could you elaborate a little bit on that, please, through you, Mr Mayor?
Well...
No, through you to Deputy Mayor Arnold. Can she elaborate on it,
Yeah,
please?
yes, of course.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Councillor Woods, thank you. The NRM committee has been working with various agencies in relation to illegal firewood collection, primarily because of the destruction of some habitat for swift parrots in the Buckland area. So it really does relate to the Buckland area to a large extent. we really haven't had a lot of success in relation to it, because quite clearly the only way the police can lay any charges is if they have photographic evidence of the firewood being collected. Once it leaves the site and is on the road, there's really no evidence as to where it was actually. So NRM is just still working through that process, and we, as I say, working with a number of different agencies to try and get a solution, but it's not going to be an easy solution.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Crawford?
Thank you, Mayor Kent. It's one through the chair again to Deputy Mayor Arnold, that she, with the, on page 102, with the sustainability report, where within the sustainability report, says provided feedback to the organisers of the bulk buy project about how it didn't work particularly well for people in the GSB. I was wondering if that was elaborated on, why it didn't work, or maybe just a copy of that report, which I might have perhaps asked for one time before. But that I would actually appreciate a copy of that report, perhaps, of the sustainability report. If that's possible to have as a councillor, that's probably on there, you know.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I don't have a problem with that. We can ask our sustainability officer to provide you with some feedback, councillor.
Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Farmer?
Also, maybe to Deputy Mayor Arnold, she was at the meeting on page 100 that, about the catchment to coast report, about halfway down, about the high number of cats being found in the penguin habitat. Is council able to do anything about that? I see the P where you're monitoring it, but is any other thing we can do, traps or cages or no? Hard one.
Through you, the issue of cats, particularly feral cats, has been ongoing for a very long time, Councillor Farmer, and it's again one of those things that we've been working with the various agencies to try and get a solution. But registration, would registration work? We don't, for pets, we don't know. As I said again, it's a matter of working with a number of different agencies to get solutions for it. But the feral cats are a major issue.
I just wonder maybe in the next C-Speak there could be a mention made of that, especially to the Bichno area, the fact that I think most people would be very much against roaming cats. And I think if we get the conversations out there to the community, maybe we have everybody looking out for them, not just the Peewee.
Absolutely, through you again, Mayor. The general population of cat owners are incredibly responsible, and we recognise that, but it still doesn't alter the fact that there is a problem with feral cats and some cats that are roaming. But again, it's finding the solution, and a bit like the illegal firewood, it's not going to be an easy one.
Thank you. Further questions, councillors? Councillor Parker?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Only one question. One thing I need to say on Section 24 committees. The Swansea Hall Committee, Jason has stood down due to work commitments. I'd just like this council to recognise the commitments he has made to the Swansea Hall. Very committed he was, and he will be a loss for the Hall Committee.
Thank you. It's all noted. Thank you, Councillor Sargent. Any further questions, councillors? Okay, moving on. Agenda item 7, officer reports requiring a decision. The adoption of the 2018-19 rates, the recommendation of the council by absolute majority. We'll get someone to move.
Mr Mayor, I'll move that council by absolute majority adopts the 2018-2019 fees and charges as presented in the agenda, and that council by absolute majority adopts the 2018-2019 rates resolution as presented in the agenda.
Second, Councillor Woods. Further discussion, councillors? No further discussion? Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor Kent. I'm not sure with the planning and development fees on page 108. Notice with minor amendment fees, permitted application is $75 now. It was $250. So there's quite a few of those that have gone down. We've kind of had a discussion before at workshop, but like with the footpaths and curb and channeling, they've actually just increased 5 cents per metre, right, of an increase in the scale of those. So I'm wondering, with the developer contribution fee, footpath is $1.25 per 1 metre. Is that correct?
General Manager?
Mr Mayor, I might ask Mr Wells to answer that, but it says you'd think if we got the $1.15 wrong, we'd get the $1.10 wrong, but...
Yeah, it's just a question.
Through the Mayor, I think it should be 115. Would that not be right, Tony? That would be per lineal metre?
Yeah. Well, we'll check on those two and adjust them accordingly.
Thank you.
There's some other ones that,
Councillor, any comments?
I don't know.
Yes, I haven't forgotten you, Councillor
Oh,
Crawford.
sorry, Mayor Kent. No, quite happy. Yep.
Thank you. No other councillor, any comments? Councillor Woods?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So with those, through you to the Manager of Works, with the things that the issues that Councillor Crawford has just brought to our attention, so that will be changed from $1.55 to what would it be?
My understanding is that they'll have another look at it to make sure it is what it should be. So it's either that or something else.
Yeah, it's, through you, Mayor, it's more likely to be $111 or $115 per lineal metre and $125 per metre. I'm not sure what happened with that, but...
Councillor Crawford?
Thank you, Mayor Kent. Just on the marine infrastructure fees, page 106, and these are just not being pedantic, but understanding them, like the use of single-phase power at the wharf. I think it's per connection for 24-hour period or part thereof might explain it better, but I can. And the other one that I had was for on page 109, for halfway down the page nearly, for retrospective approval due to compliance action by staff. Is that applicable fee plus 50%?
Through the Mayor.
Or plus 50% of the applicable fee?
It's plus.
Fee plus 50.
You just add 50% to the otherwise normal fee.
Yeah, applicable fee plus 50%. Okay, that needs to, okay.
All done, councillors? All those in favour? Councillor Woods, Councillor Steiner, Deputy Mayor, myself, Councillor Parker, Councillor Farmer. Those against? Councillor Crawford. Motion is passed. Thank you, councillors. 7.2, Spring Bay Community Strategic Plan. The recommendation is on page 121. Someone care to move that recommendation? Councillor Steiner.
I move that council agrees to commence a review of the community strategic plan with a view to the recommendations being presented to a new council post-October 2018 for its consideration.
We have a seconder for that motion, Councillor Woods. Any further discussion, councillors? Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor Kent. I'm actually really disappointed in this. I actually saw the ad in the paper last December. I was really disappointed given that the strategic plan is one of the policies, the budget and the employment of the general manager is the three things really that council is their part of their roles and responsibility to actually not to come to council about how we would like to actually look at the review of the community strategic plan. As I said, I was disappointed. We might have chosen not just to put an ad in the paper that only gleaned 4 responses from the whole community, which I haven't seen as yet, is, well, I'll just repeat it, disappointing. With the review of the community strategic plan, I would be hoping that there would be a workshop with that to actually look about how we want to engage community and how we actually want to do that review, not just have it put in front of us and as a fait accompli. Thank you.
Councillors, any further comment? No further comment? Put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Woods, Councillor Steiner, Councillor Crawford, Deputy Mayor, myself, Councillor Parker and Councillor Farmer. Approved. Thank you. 7.3 East Coast Crusaders.
Mr Mayor, I move that council approves a grant of $1,000 to the East Coast Crusaders PCYC Inc. towards the cost of purchasing equipment to form a youth drum group.
Seconder for that motion. Councillor Crawford. Open for discussion. Councillors? Any discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Approved. 7.4 Glamorgan Bay Historical Society. Recommendation. Councillor Farmer.
The recommendation that council approve a grant of $1,000 towards the cost of purchasing a new date and data projector for the Glamorgan Spring Bay Historical Society Incorporated.
The seconder for that motion. Deputy Mayor. Open for discussion, councillors. Any further discussion? No discussion.
Sorry, yes, if I may, Mr Mayor, I'd like to just congratulate the Historical Society for their in-depth report to council.
Thank you, Councillor Woods. Put the motion. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Spring Bay 7.5, Spring Bay Maritime and Discovery Centre. Recommendation is on page 124.
Mr Mayor, I'll move
Councillor Steiner moved.
that council approves a grant of $900 to the Spring Bay Maritime and Discovery Centre Incorporated, Spring Bay Shed, towards the cost of purchasing a drop saw and drill set.
We have a seconder for that motion. Councillor Farmer. Further discussion, councillors?
Can I just speak to that one? Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just quickly, I just want to clarify on the dot points there, the third one, they said they're privileged to have the local builder, Bernard Wilson, working at the shed as a member. He is indeed a privilege to have him, but also I think mention should be made of Eric O'Keefe, who has been there for the last 2 years, and he's a qualified retired boat builder who works for Bernard and is really doing a great job. He's a real perfectionist, and I think he should be mentioned alongside Bernard. Unfortunately, Bernard's eyes are starting to fade, so Eric's almost Bernard's eyes at the present time. Another point is that I spoke to Minister Guy Barnett before an election, and he promised $5,000 for purchase of timber for the boats, the restoration, specifically for that particular purpose, not to be used for tools or whatever. And he paid that money into our account, greatly received, about 2 weeks ago. And also just another one, I spoke to the Governor's husband, Richard Warner, up at the East Coast here when they were last up here. He is given the shed a 100-year-old dinghy that they own, the Warners own, to be refurbished and restored by the shed, and the Warners are going to pay for it. So it's a great honour, I think, that we've been recognised by the Governor and her husband. Yep. For that to happen. So I'm going to hopefully collect that next week, the dinghy. And as regarding the drop saw there mentioned as a part of the grant, the drop saw we have at the present time is illegal. It's not usable because it's the guard's broken. We can't refix it, so that's why we have to have another drop saw. It seems like a very common thing we should have in the first place, but that's why the one we got at the present time is not legal to be operated. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Farmer, have you noted a couple of Mr Farmer's concerns there? Ms Turvey, Councillor Steiny, thank you.
Mr Mayor, I'd just like to know whether Councillor Farmer is a member of the Spring Bay Discovery Centre.
I think I am a current financial member, but that wouldn't impede on my. I've got no monetary situation. I just wanted to put some inside information, I suppose, into that.
Yeah, I don't see that particular discussion being of pecuniary interest, but it's...
Information only.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I mean,
Yes, a fair
whatever,
question.
but,
I
you know,
accept
it's
that.
not only pecuniary, it's also perception.
Yep, thank you. Any further comment, discussion, councillors? Okay. So, that motion was passed, was it not? Spring Bay
No,
Maritime, no. So put the motion, all those in favour? Unanimous, thank you very much, councillors. Agenda item 8, miscellaneous correspondence, is there from the Treasurer, Minister for Local Government. Agenda item, any comment, questions?
Yeah, I'd like to just comment
Yes.
on something there. I may have read it wrong. On 125, and right at the bottom, it goes on about trying to get new people onto council. It says including young people and women. Then it says that better represents their constituencies. That better represents? I struggle with that bit. Have I got it wrong? Because to me it looks like better than what we got already.
Okay. Ms Kirby would duly note that. Mr Parker's comments, thank you. Agenda item 9, audit panel minutes. Questions, councillors? Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor Kent. I'm wondering if we can actually probably have a workshop about this, because I've actually had great difficulty in really understanding the minutes, you know, because they're brief, they're minutes. You know, like on page 129, Councillor Wisby also questioned the need for audit panel sign-off, e.g. dog control. And these, like, from August 2017, but I think it's probably time for, perhaps before the next council meeting at a workshop or that we perhaps have a discussion about these minutes in a workshop or have a look at them more closely, because I have had trouble understanding some of them, you know, because of lack of information, and I would also just like to have opportunity in a workshop to discuss some of the things that haven't, when it says no, they haven't been completed, even when they're not ongoing. So I'm just wondering if we could factor in a workshop on the audit panel for councillors would be excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Turvey. Any further? Councillor Woods?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to concur with Councillor Crawford on these. I'd like to ask, if I may, through you, to the General Manager and or to Deputy Mayor Arnold, who takes the minutes? Because they're not flowing, and it's really, really difficult to actually read them and understand what's going on. And yeah, so can I ask that question, please?
Deputy Mayor, I want to pass it off to the General Manager.
Mr Mayor, I certainly take the minutes and, you know, they're word for word. That's how the meeting flows. I suppose you need a background in accounting to understand what's going on, but...
Maybe.
I mean, the chair's signed off on him. He's a chartered accountant, so the committee has a look at them and verifies them and signs off on them. So I don't know what more you could get out of them.
Thank you.
If you've got any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Not right at this very minute, but I would like to ask some questions with regards to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further discussion, councillors? Thank you. Agenda item 10, motion tracking document. Councillor Steiner.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to ask perhaps the General Manager if there's any update on the Solace project.
Again, Mr Mayor, that's waiting for the water. As soon as the water is committed to and there's a timetable for the water, we will have a timetable for the project.
Thank you. And a second question about the Seafest. I mean, that's been on there for a matter of a couple of years now, I think. Is it still relevant to keep it on there? Is there ever going to be any progress on it, do you think?
Through you, Mr Mayor, we tried to get the community involved in it, but that never really went anywhere. So if council's happy to drop it, I'm happy to drop it. Yep. Off the... Everybody happy to drop it?
That's a bit of a pity, I would have thought, but certainly got some people from outside our district here for the Seafest. But trying to get somebody to actually do the work outside council staff is very, very difficult. So at this point in time, I suppose we can drop it, but it may raise its head in the future. Who knows? Okay, thank you. Any further on tracking device? Councillor Woods.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to the Works Manager. On page 139, second from the bottom, sorry, State Growth Road Trade. Is there anything to report on that, Mr Pollard? Because that's been going from since 2017.
Yes, through the chair, there was some initial correspondence from the Department of State Growth in relation to road trading. They earmarked a couple of roads that could be looked at for council to take control over, and we were going to look at roads that council could consider they should be state network roads. But it's been on there for over 12 months now. I don't think it's progressed very far at the stage via the state growth.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion, councillors? Councillor Farmer.
Just two above that, Mr Mayor, about the Botel development. Anything on the horizon regarding the Crown land from the...
General Manager?
No, nothing at this stage.
So it's been, what, 14 months? Or a while? No, more than that.
Wanted to try 14 years.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But Could there be an update on that?
We are getting closer, yes, we are getting closer, but it is Crown land, you're
Yeah.
right. So,
I know, but it's 2016, so.
well, as the Mayor said, it's been around 14 years, so.
Yep. If I may, Mr Mayor, the question was asked in 2016, but the
Yes.
issue's been since
I see.
forever.
Thank you, councillor.
Thank you.
Hold their breath.
Okay, agenda item 11, questions without notice, councillors.
Mr Mayor, I don't have a question without notice. I'd just like to go back to page 108 of the agenda where we had the question on the $1.15 and $1.25 per lineal metre. I'd just like to, for council's information, the fees and charges as they currently sit are $110 and $120, so it appears there's just been a decimal point put in those figures incorrectly.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Questions without notice? Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor Kent. Last month I asked the question whether there was any truth in the rumour that council had talked about acquiring land from the Crown with the marina, then selling it on to raise revenue, and I was told no. Yet the week after at the Marine Infrastructure meeting, that is exactly what we were told there. So I'm wondering how come I was given the incorrect answer to that question last month.
General Manager.
Mr Mayor, that's simply not true.
Well, that's what Mr Burberry said at that meeting.
Mr Burberry wouldn't know, Mr Mayor.
Well, that's what he said had been discussed, so I'll leave it at that.
I think you'll find that what was discussed was actually saying that we wouldn't be given the land to sell, that the land would be sold and those funds would go towards the marina.
That's not what Mr
And the
Burberry
master
said.
plan.
So, the other question I have is quite a few months ago, many months ago, Mr Waminga put in a notice of non-compliance with planning that councillors were informed was going for a legal view. I haven't heard anything since then. I'm wondering what's happened with that and when it will come back to council for that legal view on that.
General Manager.
Mr Mayor, I've got no idea what Councillor Crawford's talking about. If she'd like to elaborate on it, we can get to the bottom of it.
It was a letter from Mr Waminga. Councillors will remember that came, and it was actually that it was going to be actually dealt with within council, and then someone said it was inappropriate, and it was then referred on for legal advice from, I can't remember if it was Page Siegel, anyway, for legal advice, and it was then the legal advice was going to come back to council. It was I think I can't actually remember it totally. It was a note. I haven't had time to look it up today. I think it was a notice of non-compliance regarding planning.
Okay, so
Mr
let's
Mayor,
start.
what property was it on, Councillor Crawford?
It was on a property on Tasman Highway.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's take it on notice,
Yeah,
and
sure.
then we'll find out during the next few days.
Mr Mayor, Tasman Highway's a long highway.
Yeah. Well, we'll endeavour to find out.
Well, I would assume that this council doesn't probably get too many notices of non-compliance, so it shouldn't be that difficult to locate.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Crawford. Any further discussion on questions without notice?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. From what I was told and what I've heard on the news, that there was quite a few submissions put forward regarding Cambria.
Yes.
Given the fact that the numbers are way up, are we going to be given some kind of a workshop or submission, or a kind of a condensed submission prior to the, I think it's going into the August meeting?
August, September, it'll come back to the council, In the meantime, it will be collated by council staff and gone through and separate what needs to be separated. There are a number of innuendos, or if you want to call it that, on how many people have put submissions in. Some say 500.
Yeah, well, I just want to know.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
yeah.
If the
I'll
council's
answer the
going to get
question as it
opportunity.
is. It's open and transparent.
Yeah.
And we're sort of saying somewhere between 200 and 300. We won't know until such time as the council officers have done their work, and it will be presented to council prior to going to the Tasmanian Planning Commission.
Yeah.
They make the final decision.
Just don't want to be criticised again that we actually get the results of these 500 odd, 200 odd submissions 4 days before the council meeting. I just wonder if we can, are we able to see these results of these submissions before that council meeting? So we can go through.
We'll do our best, but, yep. Fine.
So just give us some more time to
Yep.
get through them.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Okay. So before I close this part of the meeting, I'd like to put on record and thank the Deputy Mayor for taking my position for the last 6 weeks or so, whilst I was overseas. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
And we have a other meeting shortly, so perhaps I can declare this meeting closed.
Excuse me, Mayor Kent, do we need to do a late item agenda for the inclusion of the confidential? It was to us, it did come late. I'm just thinking before we close the meeting, it's...
We're not closing the meeting, we're moving into closed session, so we can just do that.
Within close, yeah.
Before you move into closed, yeah.
Okay. Happy with that response, Councillor Crawford?
I'd feel better if it was actually, it doesn't have to be, if it's a confidential one, it doesn't need to be recorded in this.
No, well, I think there
Minutes.
is documentation there that we certainly don't want out in the public arena. So, as far as I'm concerned, there's quotes, all that sort of stuff there.
No, I wasn't suggesting that. I was suggesting that it's actually included as a late item agenda, like now that we accept it as a late item agenda in the confidential. I
Yes.
think we probably should have done it at the beginning of the meeting.
We
Okay.
haven't gone into
But-
the, yeah, so we do it now.
We do it now, okay. All right. So there's someone care to move that? Do you want to move that, Councillor
Yeah, I'm
Crawford?
happy to,
Thank you.
that, accept a late item agenda
Can we have a second?
on the
Councillor
heading.
Woods? All those in favour?
I think we need to actually probably put what it's concerning.
There,
'Cause-
written in the agenda.
right. Okay.
Okay, all those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. Being no further business, I declare the meeting closed, and the live streaming and recording of minutes will now be switched off. And I'm to check the streaming has